This is our strategy flipping houses in Canada for 2023. Flipping houses in 2022 versus flipping houses in 2023 are going to be two drastically different markets to work in, and you need to have an adaptive strategy to know how to do it profitably. So stick around to the end of the video so you can get this year started flipping houses like a pro. Generally speaking, when people are looking to get into real estate, one of the first things that they look at is how to flip houses, because it's kind of like a quick in and out thing, and you can make some pretty good money if you know how to do it right. And on top of that, it's generally popular, but people don't often understand that you can lose some pretty big money if you don't know what you're doing, especially right now, coming out of 2022, a fluctuating market. Things are different, things are unstable. How can you really know if your project that you're doing is going to be profitable? So let's start off by talking about some of the differences between 2022 market and 2023.
Beginning of 2022, we saw that huge hype of the real estate market, and then they came down, and now it's still going down because of the interest hiking, all that stuff. The main thing that we need to all understand is that the market is still very unpredictable. It's still not forgiven. If you make one simple mistake, it can cost you tens of thousands of dollars easily. So the very first thing that every investor needs to be aware is that to pick the right market to start off with.
Some of the differences that we look at in consideration of the way that the market is fluctuating and the way things are going is we have contingencies now. We have contingencies that are a little bit more long-term. We no longer count just on being able to offload the property, because sometimes you do a bad flip, it doesn't work out too well. You can at least break even. But right now, people are selling, and they're selling for losses. People are selling losing $100,000, $200,000, their down payment is gone. And for people who are just starting out, you work to save up that down payment for so long and you lose that, that is going to set you back however many years it took you to save that money if that's what you're planning on doing again. So you need to make sure to avoid these mistakes. And there's a few things that we do to help prevent these mistakes, such as by using certain formulas.
There are actually a couple different things that we look at every time that we invest in a different city or different products. And the number one thing that we always look at is the population size of the city. We want to make sure that population size is over 100,000. Highway infrastructure in place, because those type of city, when it comes down, it doesn't come down as much because there's always demand going into that city. There's always going to be a growing population in that specific city. The second indicator to determine whether or not this is a good market to flip is that we use the number of active listings, divide that by the number of homes sold in the past 30 days. That indicator is actually really important to us because, again, in flipping business, we want to make sure that our product moves.
This is where one of the things that we learned in the fluctuations from 2022 is what types of products are moving and what types are not, and also what types are sustainable longer term if you have to hold them, and what properties are not. So this taught us a few things. So for example, commercial property, even in the fluctuating market, is still quite powerful, still performs rather well. Commercial property has a little more versatility to it. Residential property, the one thing that is the worst possible situation for anybody who has, let's say, a duplex or even a triplex in this type of market where, let's say, if you have a variable mortgage with the interest rates going up and you flip your house but you can't sell it and you have to hold it, is if your tenants stop paying rent and now you have rising interest rates, no tenants not paying rent, and overall you get stuck. And this is where people say it's a buyer's market, because if you find somebody like that who's in a bad situation, that is when some of these buyers are able to buy. Because I don't want people to misunderstand. When people are saying that it's a buyer's market right now, it's not a buyer's market for everyone. It's a buyer's market for those investors who are prepared for this. Even regular home buyers right now are having a lot of trouble trying to afford a property because of the high interest rates. But there is opportunity to buy. And I think that's what people need to understand for the distinction. So if you're looking to flip houses in an ideal situation, you look for those deals. You look for that opportunity to buy into something like that. And that's where you can make money.
That's why in today's market, we're readjusting overall criteria. We need to make sure that the location is in Class B and above. It's not just any locations.
Yeah.
And even the property type needs to be very strict. And also we need to take the depreciation into our consideration when we're making an offer.
Because right now, one of the differences is that we wouldn't spend as much money as we used to spend renovating a property as we would today. Today, we would have a considerably more minimal renovation budget just to make things effective, and especially for investing that money, that renovation budget, into a long-term hold type project, which right now, all flips should be mid to long-term flips or turns. And in that case, you might not even call them flips, but you need to make sure you have that contingency in place. Just as a reminder, if you want to know even more about how to flip houses, make sure to check out our free house flipping webinar. We're going to leave some info about it in the description below.
So number one thing about flipping projects right now is that you have to have multiple different options. Before you can literally buy something, then you can trust that the property will sell for the significant amount of money for any sort of project.
So in today's market, would we consider flipping a single family home?
Definitely not, because single family doesn't generate any cash flow. Nice quick flip, but at the same time, if the moment that you're unable to actually sell the property and the market is forcing you to kind of pivot into a rental market or Airbnb, that unit doesn't generate enough cash flow at all.
Yeah, and your money gets stuck and locked in, which is besides the point of a flip.
Exactly. quickly, then it just gets very stressful.
So would you consider flipping a duplex in today's market?
I think duplex is a very minimum number of units that we need to aim for, because even duplex only just gives us a break even with the interest hikes and all that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's with Airbnb, you said, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and the thing about that is that even right now, when we have certain duplexes that we're waiting for the market to sort of stabilize, we don't even want to put them into long-term rentals, because the risk factor in that, where you have all your eggs in just 1 or 2 units, if your tenants stop paying rent with these kind of high interest, you're going to be in some serious trouble. That might even be a little bit more on the gray line questionable.
Another reason why choosing duplex and above is a great strategy right now is also because any single family that wants to move in and needs a bit of a subsidies from the tenants, that's the type of products that they would aim for.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the shifts that we're seeing from 2022 to 2023 is that with the rising interest rate and the cost of living going up overall, one of the things is that before the duplex was the minimum that you needed to in order to house hack for a single family home buyer to go in, buy a house, and then rent out the basement so that they can subsidize their mortgage payments. Now you need 2 units. So I feel that the minimum that people are going to be looking at buying now in order to afford a house is 3 units so that they can live in one and get an extra 2 incomes to help pay for the bills.
Yeah, so if you can pick that project, that would be ideal. But
Yeah.
also the location is very, very important. I would totally avoid the Class C neighborhood at this moment. Past 2 to 3 years, there's tons of investors that would just pick up any properties. In today's market, it's different.
A lot of those investors who look at those properties, sometimes people think, oh, well, there's still like a market that will eventually recover with everything else. And while that may be true, the problem that I think people don't anticipate is that when you buy in a C-class or D-class area, it's not that the property value won't increase over time as well. It's just that how stressful is it going to be holding that property in that type of an area, because it becomes the operation that becomes heavy.
And the last thing is an easy renovation, because right now we do need to control the budget and the timeline so that it's a little bit more predictable.
So right now, the adjustment for the renovation strategy really has to do with the budget, how much money we're going to spend on the renovations. Whereas before, we could spend a lot more money doing higher end renovation, luxury type stuff, and it can take a little bit longer. It's okay. Now we want to make sure to shorten the carrying time, and we need to get the property either sold or rented as soon as possible. So that's something that has changed in terms of our budget for time frame and our budget for how much we're going to spend on the renovations, like the finishes. And the last adjustment that we're also making for renovations is how we're going about renovating a property and how many units are we renovating into it. So sometimes if we, let's say, had a non-conforming triplex, we would sometimes convert it into a nice duplex. But now we would just leave everything as it is and just renovate everything and just make them nice enough so that we can put tenants in there and it will carry the mortgage until we hit a healthier market or a more stable market that we can calculate.
If we don't sell.
To recap this quickly, if somebody wants to flip a property successfully in 2023, what do they need to make sure to do?
Okay, so how we're going to do is that we're going to be extremely selective with even the neighborhood, not just the city, the neighborhood. After we anchor that neighborhood, we're going to also be looking at our criteria and making sure that we're constantly making the adjustment for the depreciation. That part needs to be taken into consideration into our spreadsheet. And the last one is our execution has to be on point. There's no time to waste because the market is still shifting. So we want to control the renovation as much as possible and flip that product back to the market as soon as possible.
And the only other thing I want to add on to that is that all the product that we're currently selecting has the potential for mid to long-term hold, whether it's Airbnb or multi-unit residential. We want to make sure that we can carry it should the market not be favorable. If you want to know even more about how to flip houses, make sure to check out our free house flipping webinar. We're going to leave some info about it in the description below.